Oh.
What's that? I said you're gonna get your 50%. That's what he said, yeah. Just about.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6:30. I'm Neil Hutchling. I'm the president of the Board of Supervisors. I'm calling this meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming out on what was a rainy evening that hopefully is clear now. Just a couple of announcements. We have 2 supervisor seats up for election. We have 2 incumbents running. Supervisor Branson here nearest me, and in the middle, Supervisor Brooks are incumbents. Former Supervisor Camp on the far side was a supervisor a few years ago. So you may know all 3 faces, but only 2 will be elected in November. That's why we wanted to have a meeting so you have a chance to meet them, hear their point of view. We actually have 5 supervisors on the board, in addition to the 2 incumbents. We have me, who's serving as the president, and back in the room we have Mike Gilpin, who is the vice president. From stand, Mike. And I think that's why Craig Harris earlier as well. Okay, so Craig Harris. So all 5 supervisors are here tonight. Tonight is a question for these gentlemen. This is a official meeting. It's being recorded and broadcast live via Zoom. If you're viewing this meeting on Zoom, you will not be able to submit questions for the public Q&A. Within the meeting notes, you will find the email address for the candidates where you can submit questions that you may have to them after the meeting. I think that's all the comments I have. If you have a cell phone, please silence it so it's not going off in the middle of the question or answer. We're going to be fairly casual. We're hoping to keep answers to the 3-minute range. Somebody can kind of bully too much, I guess. But I don't think we're going to have a problem with these guys. They're pretty direct with all their answers, I think, and I think it should be a good evening. So Tanya, who is our general manager of the district, will be doing the moderating tonight. I'll kind of sit on the sidelines, and I don't expect to be very active unless needed.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and open the floor to the candidate opening statements, starting with Supervisor Branson.
Good evening. In the event that I'm successful in pursuing my re-election, I have priorities. They are around infrastructure, which we've all heard about. The order of my priorities is essentially roads and drainage, which we all recognize are key to the long-term viability of Sun Lake. The second priority is our utility, water, and sewer system, maintaining the integrity of that, and assuring ourselves that we're in a position where we can grow those facilities as needed in light of the new activity that we've been enjoying and hopefully will continue to. So if we are successful at marketing 12 and continuing the growth. We gotta be able to accommodate those people from a utility perspective. So that's a big priority. My third priority, and this can be somewhat unpopular, but is amenities. In spite of what some people think about particular amenities here, we have to be cognizant of the fact that people are not gonna come here and pay $700 a year to live here so they can fish and eat and sleep. There has to be something to draw them, something to enjoy, something they want to be part of. So our pool facilities, our racket club, and the shuffleboard course, the golf courses, all of those things are very, very important and very much the engines that run Silent Lake. My intent going forward would be to become much more involved than I have been in the capital procurement process. I have time on my hands. I want to meet with vendors. I want to participate in evaluations of capital spending. And I want to control capital spending to the tightest degree that we can in order to make sure that we have adequate reserves and are able to deal with any unforeseen emergency.
Thank you for coming. My name is Braden Brooks. I am running for re-election. My wife Pam and I have been residents of Silent Lake since 2011. I was appointed to the board in fall of 2017, and I've also served on the golf committee for the last 4 years. Some of my accomplishments, the first 3 years that I've been on the board, I'd just like to review quickly. Golf membership rates. When I first got on the board, as any of you who are golfers know, we have different levels of memberships. And when you look at those levels of memberships, initially, they made no sense. There was no rhyme or reason as to why we would charge one group one price, one group another price. So what we did was, I instituted or recommended to the board that we put a percentage application to all of the memberships of the full family and full single. And the board agreed, and that was adapted. So now what happens if you do decide to take a price increase, it would be a percentage increase across the board for all categories. Also, I noticed when I first got involved that Casper was reporting financials for the restaurant and the golf portion of the business as one. So you really couldn't tell what one was doing without looking at the total. Just very difficult to do. So I challenged at the time Ron Wunderling, who was regional, and said, you guys have got to split it up so we can see exactly what's going on. October of 2 years ago was the first month that they started reporting the numbers correctly. So now we see revenues and expenses for the golf course. We separately, we see revenues and expenses for the restaurant. And as most of you know, that has opened up a whole can of worms and a lot of conversation. But it certainly was something that needed to be done. I definitely believe in working with a balanced budget. I can be honest with you. I think I've seen 3 budgets. The first 2 I did not vote for. I thought we were spending our spending was way out of line compared to what our revenues were, and I couldn't support the budget. I will tell you, this year I did support the budget because we passed a balanced budget. In fact, this year we have a surplus of $100,000. I'm talking about the budget for 2020, 2021. As a precaution, though, I also recommended to the board, which they agreed to allocate some of the capital monies, or take some of the capital monies and put them aside, hold them until January. Because as you all know, we're dealing with a pandemic, and as you all know, we're not sure what's going to happen with our friends up north. Whether they're even going to be able to come down here. So I said we should hold some money. The board went through all the capital a couple of weeks ago, and I believe the number was somewhere around $500,000 that we are holding. We kind of froze it until January. If situations present that we can spend it without hurting ourselves, we'll certainly do that. Roads and drainage. Again, in my early tenure on the board, I noticed that we had We had some capital donated towards roads and drainage, and we had some regular accounts or expense accounts donated to it. And it was just all over the place. The numbers were not consistent. The numbers were not sufficient. So in here, I recommended to the board, and we agreed to do this, that we would take all the money out of the capital, put it into the regular expense accounts, and properly fund them. I'm happy to say the last 2 years, and then this year coming up, we've allocated $500,000 for those improvements. And I would expect that we will continue to do that. Recreational facilities, I can tell you I'm very proud of the shuffleboard courts. I don't know if you all have seen them. This was kind of something I took over or took a responsibility on at the very beginning. Originally, we were going to put 2 courts up. Probably was not going to end up being sufficient if indeed people here accepted it. So we went to Tanglewood and we checked out a couple of other places. And we had developed what I consider to be a first-class shuffleboard facility here by the tennis courts. If you haven't seen it, I certainly would recommend that you see it. It's certainly something that you'd be very proud of. Landowner seats and popular seats. This was a big issue earlier this spring. As you know, there's 5 supervisors, there's 3 popular seats, and there's 2 landowner seats. We were concerned, the board as a general was concerned about the landowner seats. The way the voting was, it was $1 1 unit, which weighted heavily towards Tanglewood and heavily towards the hospital. The hospital chose to get involved in voting. So the board was at a dilemma what to do. At first, we decided that we would possibly go to 5 popular seats, and we did vote on that, and I voted for it. After we voted for that, I've got numerous people coming up to me complaining, saying, "You've taken away my vote. I don't know how you can do that. I'm a resident, maybe not here, I'm a resident, but I'm a resident, and I want to vote." So I went back to the board and I said, "Let's try this." And I said, maybe we can do one parcel, 1 vote. And a lot of people said, well, I don't know, the board, we had conversations, the board went with it, everybody was happy with it. And I can tell you, went to the county and they voted 5-0 in favor. So now everybody who is a resident, or I should say an owner of property in Center Lake, gets some sort of a vote. Not necessarily all the votes, but they're certainly entitled to a vote. And with that,
Mr. Brooks, thank you.
I look forward to any questions.
Tough acts to follow here. Tough acts to follow. I have to take a little bit of a different approach in that I know there's people on Zoom or Facebook that might not know me. I know most people are here and they know me, but for the benefit of those people that are viewing or streaming, I would like to use some background on me. My name is Mark Camp. I'd like to thank the district here for pulling this meeting together. I think it's a great forum. I think it's a good way of introducing the candidates. I've been a homeowner in Sun Lake for 10 years. And some of my background, I'm a graduate of Southern New Hampshire University, as well as Boston University, with a degree in information technology that was paid for by an employer that actually paid for my education. So I was greatly appreciative of that. Some other facts about my personal is that I've been married to my wife, Linda, who's out there somewhere. And I did say Linda. Of 51 years, she's the love of my life. We have 2 children, one up north and one over in the Tampa Bay area. And we have 2 wonderful grandchildren. We're very proud of them. I have a little over 30 plus years in management at different levels, including senior management levels, working with corporations such as Honeywell, Ava Technology, HP, and I finished my career working for Fidelity Investments on their trading floor. And some other things in between there. I was fortunate to take an early retirement at one point. I'm a member or served in the service, short stint, but I was there. I've served on a lot of boards over my years, and I think it's important that I bring up this board, as Neil Hotelling said, or President Hotelling said, I am a past member of the board. I was a supervisor. I was also the president. I also won a 4-year extended election, or the next election. Unfortunately, prior to even starting that time, my election, I had to resign. It was personal in nature. We're all getting older. Certain things happen in life. I have no control over that. And I can let you know right now, as I sit here, and I hope this isn't a defining point for anybody out there, but my wife, my children, my family is number one over everything. So hopefully nothing will get in my way so that I can carry on what I wanted to do those other 4 years. From there, I want to also make note that some people may not be aware that supervisors do step down. It's an interesting factoid, as someone would say, that in the past 7 years, we've had 6 supervisors step down for various reasons, some of them health, some of them personal. So these things happen, as I say, when we get older. I've been involved in many, many outside activities. I won't bore you with those. But what I would like to talk about, and Mr. Branson, and actually Ray also, the infrastructure here needs to have a plan. We have a water and sewer, I don't want to say a problem, but we have 40+ years of piping. We've encountered some problems with that, and we need to put a plan together for the future. We own and purchased this past year, I believe it was, maybe it was a little more than a year ago, what they call Unit 12. It's 12 or 1,500 units, if I'm correct. And I think it's important to know that if we don't have a plan in place, somebody comes in, the good news would be if somebody came in, we would have to be able to support that drainage, water, sewage, and so on. I'm going to divert and say one of the things that I would like to see, and many people spoke to me in the past, is a beautification program. If you drive down Sun Lake Boulevard, let's say you're looking for property, one of the Southern Homes properties, one of the, other properties are being built by several of the builders in here. It looks very nice. It looks appealing. When people come into the community, they see that and they like it. There's flags up. It looks like a nice community. The downside is they happen to come in on the north side, and there's a big sign out there. There is nothing that directs them even towards the city hall. There's nothing that directs them towards this place. So I would like to see a beautification plan put into place. There are places in this community that really need to be, let's say, polished up a little bit. Policies and procedures. I was involved on the board. A lot went around with policies and procedures, and I'm a stickler about policies and procedures. I figure if you have a policy, then you need to enforce that policy. And I understand there are situations. So we need to re-examine some of our policies and procedures. I was instrumental in putting a policy through or with the board, but I started it for the golf operation here. And I understand, somebody can correct me from the board, that might be going through revision in the near future. I hope that they take into consideration where the violations are and why we aren't handling them. I look a little more towards the community, the people out here. I wish this was a regular meeting that we have at the board with all of these people out. Instead, we get 2 or 3. I think there's a way of bridging that gap between the community and the board of supervisors. Now, I know, and every one of the supervisors will admit to this, I'm sure, people come up to us. I'm not on the board. People came up to me way back and they said, my voice doesn't count. I come up, I do suggestions, it falls on deaf ears. We need to get rid of that. We need to bring it together. As far as cost overruns, I'm a little concerned about that. When I was on the board, this place that we're in, and I'm not against the rest of it, by the way. I think it was a great approach for many. It started out as a pretty expensive project. When I was on the board, we tried to cap it at $650,000. I won't talk about the supervisors that were with me, and it kept on going up around $900,000 in the budget. They said, no, we're talking about $650,000. They said, we'll never get over $650,000. Guess what? $1.3 million later, and we're here. So I consider that a cost overrun. I'm almost done. Okay. Sorry, just a couple more seconds. Obviously, you talked about recreation. I think that's an important part here, as well as I do have one other part, and I believe that the district should have the ability to make decisions, and I'll explain that later after in my closing. statement, because we're paying them to do things. We don't need to micromanage them. And I see that happening a lot from the board. The board needs to know what's going on, but you don't need to have $4,000 and $5,000 expenditures coming back 3 and 4 times for approval. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the time.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start out with my first question to Mr. Branson. If you received $1 million grant to use for the district any way you wanted, what would you do with it and why?
Having not seen the question before, the first thing I would do would be to contract with a professional grant writing service who would devote their time and energy to Sun Lake and not just kind of look around and see what's available. Because I see grant money for new sewer systems on Spring Lake. We've received grant money here for the Shuttleport courts. I believe we received grant money for the pool when it was built. We're missing out on a lot of that. So I would take probably $40,000 or $50,000 of that money and contract with a professional service who would devote their time and effort to helping us procure more public money. Take that $1 million and turn it into $1.5 million or $2 million. In terms of the priority, I don't see something that I couldn't wait to spend it on. I'm not a believer in spending it because it's there. So I would start to prioritize the projects based on what grant money might be available. And I would pursue any improvements that were available and had potential.
Thank you, Mr. Branson. Mr. Brooks?
I got $1 million, I can tell you, I wouldn't spend any on the hospital. If I had $1 million, I think it's critically, and Joe mentioned this before, I've been more to, it's critically important that we build up our amenities here. We need, outside of the golf course, we need to really have a first-class operation as far as what we offer. If we want to grow the community to the extent that we think we want to grow it. I look at the swimming pool that we have, I look at the weight room that we have, I look at the playground that we have, this community center over there, and I just think there's lots of room for improvement. I'm going to assume I can take care of the roads and the sewers and all that with our own money, without having to get extra money on that. That's a yearly project, it'll probably take 10, 15 years. But this is the type of project that you would look for additional funding or grants on to get accomplished. So I would probably, I think we're actually doing it right now. I know we sent out a survey to all you folks on how you feel about the amenities here. Depending on how that comes back, if everybody's all in agreement, I would certainly want to support that. And if I had $1 million, I'd put it towards that in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Ham?
$1 million, okay. It kind of echoes some of the same things that Ray and Joe said. But I guess I would look at a marketing plan. And I know we've had a lot of them. And when I say a marketing plan, I mean a full functional marketing plan where we have somebody, we need to promote Sun and Lake. The more people we get in Sun and Lake, the bigger the population, the greater the revenues from assessments and so on. But we need to do it in a manner or a fashion where we don't do a $250,000 or $200,000 study and then not have a plan behind it. So I would believe in a marketing plan behind that. That might mean bringing in staff, a professional, let's say, salesperson. So if they lead one out, there was a follow-up process to that, and they could then start to come into this community, hopefully buy. We've tried pieces of that in the past. Sometimes it's worked a little bit, but unfortunately, we don't have the staff, and we don't have the follow-up for it. So it falls on deaf ears. If you get a lead in and nobody's here to call back, then what good is that lead? By, once again, bringing in those people into this community, there'll be a significant increase, hopefully, in revenue through assessments, through water, and through maybe even golf. The golf memberships might go up, in terms of growth. So that would be probably a big piece of it. I know it's a lot of money, but it takes a lot of money to make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. I have a question for each of you, so I'll start with Mr. Brooks. We have a concern about district-owned land that's behind our home. When we purchased our home, we were told that the area would be maintained on a regular basis. This does or has not been happening. How would you handle or how would you address this?
We're talking about, it's district property, I don't know if anybody here is, but is it district property that we're referring to?
We have a concern about district-owned land behind our home.
We had a meeting, a couple meetings ago, and we think we worked it out to who will be responsible. It will either be the responsibility of Microlandis people on the golf course, and it was split up. I don't remember exactly how it was split up. If I remember correctly, I think we've accounted for everything. So if you're not getting regular attention, which you should be, now, you have to forget about the rain. If it rains every other day, certainly things are not going to go at the rate that everybody would like to see it, even though the growth of the stuff is going to continue to get higher and higher. But assuming all things are normal, I would expect that you should get your area cleared at least once a week, perhaps once every 2 weeks. If you're not, then you call. And I'll make sure it's taken care of.
Mr. Camp, did you want me to read the question again?
Yes, please.
We have a concern about district-owned land that is behind our home. When we purchased our home, we were told that the area would be maintained on a regular basis. This does or has not been happening. This has not been happening. How would you address this?
Well, I would hope that if it wasn't happening, they would call their supervisors, see if he or she could get involved. But since there is, I believe, and I'm not on the board now, but I believe there is a plan in place to do that. So if it's not being done, then I hate to say it, but we have to go to that department and say, so-and-so is having a problem getting their property cleared, or I should say maintained. I mean, if I had a problem with that, the first thing I'd be doing is going down to the district and saying, what's going on here? Now, if the district isn't responding, if that's their real question, if they're not responding to their request to have it maintained, then I think that's a totally different problem we have to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. Mr. Branson?
My first question would be, they were told by who? We all know that realtors kind of make commitments for us. We've seen that. It's the district made commitment through Mike Curley, through the golf operation, and we didn't live up to it. They definitely should be following up with us, and we would be following up with Tanya to make sure that if things happen. Overall, I think the problem areas that I've been aware of have cleaned up pretty well in the last year. I think that's been through the joint effort of the district employees of Mike's and of the golf course people.
Thank you, Mr. Branson. Moving on to the next question. This will be a question for each of you, starting with Mr. Camp. Is there a code of conduct for someone removing signs from private property?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. I'm actually wondering what prompted that question. Things that made you go, I don't have enough time to really answer that fully. And I don't know who submitted the question, but what I might suggest, and I'd be more than happy to work with you and even get together with you offline, that possibly you should look at the Article 7, Section 12 of the ordinances that were incorporated here in accrued by Highlands County, and we are governed by some of those. Now, it gives you some of the answers, you know, what put that question out here. It will give you some of the answers. If it doesn't give you all of the answers, you can have my email address. They have it here. Send me an email. I would be more than pleased to sit down with you at your convenience of mine, if something is mutually agreeable, to kind of discuss this further. Thank you very much.
Mr. Branson?
I don't know why anyone would touch a sign that wasn't on their property. I'm not picking on Mark, but granted, the sign may have been in an inappropriate place. The enforcement is not up to the citizens or the board. It's up to the security folks and the community government. So I don't think a sign anywhere should be touched by anyone who doesn't own it.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks?
Well, as I understand it, the district policy is only the district can remove signs. Nobody else has the authority to remove those signs, any signs. So if somebody has a problem with a sign, they call the district and say, you know, whatever their reason is, I don't think this sign is right, it shouldn't be there, what have you. But nobody has permission from the district to just go in and take a sign. I believe that's the policy that we have, and it's been stated in our last board.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Moving on to the next question for each of you. I'll start with Mr. Branson. Why is there no charge for a second golf cart?
That's an interesting question. It was a Casper decision, which I support. I think Casper should be in a position to make those calls. The club actually benefits in that the club's ground fleet is not being utilized. When a resident has 2 cards, if the resident provides insurance, proof of insurance, and saves wear and tear on our equipment, I don't see why that's not a good decision.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
We're talking about 2 carts, 2 personal carts.
2 cards for one property.
2.
I don't know, I've never been asked that question. It's a valid point. I guess if you have 2 personal carts, there probably should be a charge for the second carts. I don't think it would be appropriate to charge full price. I think you should give a discount to it. But quite frankly, that's something that we'd have to have more conversation on. I'm not even sure in how many cases it's applied. I don't know how many, to my knowledge, there are not a lot of people that have 2 carts in some way. So I think we're talking about the very few, not the majority.
Thank you. Mr. Camp?
Can I ask you, did they say why they would not be in charge of the second card?
Why no charge for the second golf cart?
As a member, and not now privy to all of the dealings that go on, I go on, I get my membership, and I can't answer what that reasoning is. It would require a lot of discussion as to why they don't charge it, but I'm not gonna speculate why they don't. It's not appropriate at this time. You need to have the conversation with the golf management.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. Next question will be for each of you. I'll start with Mr. Brooks. The 10% gas tax is not shared with Sun and Lake. Money is sent to Avon Park, Sebring, and not Sun and Lake. Why? Because we are a special district, and that seems unfair and not a municipality. I apologize, that's not really a question, but it.
I agree. If you're asking why we are not reaping any monies from this particular gas tax, it is because we are a special district. I can tell you that we've had conversations at the last couple of board meetings on this, and that our lawyer is doing some further investigation into it. And quite frankly, if it was up to me, I think we'll give it a shot with the county and see what the county has to say. But at this point, we're not eligible for it. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Thank you. Mr. King?
The only knowledge I have of this, since I wasn't privy to sitting on board meetings where, or I should say the one-on-one meetings you can have, is that we aren't getting our fair share of the tax money. What I do know is, for the gas tax, what I do know is at the last two meetings, this has been a discussion. And at the last meeting, I believe Tanya said, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, you were looking into this to find out, and until you get further information, you don't have an answer yet. And I guess that David might be working on it. I believe that's what you said at the last meeting. I might be wrong.
At the last meeting, we did mention that we as a special district do not qualify for revenues from the Department of Revenue as for gas tax.
And-
But David is working on some, an amendment to provide to the Board of Supervisors, yes.
Yes, that's what I thought. So, until that happens, I mean, I don't know that anybody at these three tables can answer why it's not happening yet. It's just being investigated, right?
Mr. Branson?
Correct me if I'm wrong, David, but, my understanding is that's not a county regulation. It's a state regulation.
Correct, the state divvies up those funds, and we don't have a way to directly access them, that I've been able to find so far.
Having said that, I'm being told by a couple of the real old timers here that we at one time reached a compromise with the county when they were in the asphalt business, in which we received 3 years of free asphalt, kind of as a feel-good sort of thing, since they couldn't help us the other way. I don't know if the county still owns an asphalt facility or not. Anybody know that?
They do.
If they do, that might be something that would be worth discussing with our, I mean, we're having a new county commissioner representing us. So it might be a conversation we want to start with him immediately. If it was done before, maybe it can be done again. And that would have significant financial value.
Thank you, Mr. Branson. Moving on to the next question, this is from Mark Camp. What are the reasons you resigned your position last year, and why should we vote for you?
That's a valid question. I think I addressed it at the very beginning, but we'll have to go over that again. Things happen in our lives. They're personal. It's not for the public, they're personal. And I don't have to share with anybody. But I did say my family is number one in my life, and that's my priority. I stepped down because they're more important. I hate to say it, I don't want you people to think I don't care about you, but I do care about you. But when given the option here or there, you have to go where number one is. Number one is my family. I felt badly that I couldn't take the second term of 4 years and fulfill some of the things that I wanted to do at that time. Like I said, I'm here, things are healthy, or things are good again, I'm blessed. And I feel that I can pick up where I honestly left off and carry forward, give what the people want here, instead of some of the special interest groups, quite frankly. It's going to the special interest groups, and I can do what I think is appropriate for this community.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. Moving on to the next question, this is for each of you. We'll start with Mr. Branson. When will the board focus more on a better future for Sun and Lake and stop micromanaging?
I'm sorry, say that again.
When will the board focus more on a better future for Sun and Lake and stop micromanaging?
That's a good question. There are people, who are inherently micromanagers. I never felt like I was one of those. I do think that we need to redefine the relationship between staff and the board. I think there's a lot of things that happen at the staff level in a vacuum. And we find out after everything's said and done what was decided. I have an issue with that. But in terms of micromanaging, me telling Mike Hurley where to mow, or me telling anybody else how to do the job. I've never actively participated in that, I don't intend to.
Thank you, Mr. Branson. Mr. Brooks?
I think the reason that we come across as micromanaging, just so you all know, is because we can't speak to each other other than at a board meeting. So I have no clue what any of my peers are thinking pertaining to anything that we're discussing unless we're at a board meeting. So does it seem like we're asking a lot of questions and sometimes it seems like we're wasting our time? Perhaps, but when we're spending money, your money, I think we have to know what each of us is thinking before we make that decision. So if you call that micromanaging, then I apologize, but in my opinion, do we overdo it? Perhaps, but it's very important. As far as looking at the bigger picture, there's no question we've got to eventually come up with a solution on growing or what's the word, Cliff? What's your word, Cliff? Coming up with a plan to expand Sun Lake. We've done a couple of promotional plans or I can't think of the word. Marketing plans, thank you. And I was in marketing. We've done some marketing plans in the past, and I can tell you, we've spent $100,000 or so of your money and kind of thrown it right down the drain. So we don't know how to do it, to be honest with you, yet. We've had a lot of people tell us how to do it, but we haven't been able to figure it out. That's a challenge. That's something that we have to come up with. That's critically important. I think that does.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Camp?
See, and I had talked about taking that $1 million and applying some of that money towards that same kind of plan, so we have a little bit of a green here. Now, as far as micromanaging, back to your original question, I also kind of brought that up on some of my opening statements. I think there is a form of micromanaging going on. And David, you can correct me if I'm wrong from my old days of sunshine and all of that, but first of all, no board member can direct anybody to do anything, okay? And one of the things that I see in micromanaging, and I see it a lot as I attend the meetings myself, and I'll give you an example right now. Several months back, somebody came in, we had an issue with speed bumps, things of that nature. So they came up, and you've seen them all around the community here, where they have calming devices to speed bumps. I think they're around $1,300 a piece. They're somewhat portable. Okay. They came up with, I would say, a procedure to get X amount of names. I think it's 20. And if they brought that to the board, then the board would say yay or nay. And then the board would say, but you have to do this study and this study and this study. I think it was almost 3 months, several meetings, before a decision was made for an expenditure of $1,400. I witnessed it again this week. People came in, they had their 20 signatures or whatever. China's organization decided to, I think it was with Mike Hurley and company, they said after viewing the area, they didn't think it was appropriate to put a speed bump. They measured it out. They said, I don't know, it's 280 feet, it's on a curve, it's this and it's that. They came up with what I believe were all legitimate reasons for not putting a speed bump in there. But Mike took it a step further, I believe it was Mike, that said, I'll tell you what, we'll get some more statistics on this. And I'm gonna put that speed machine that we bought that talks about your speed when you're driving down the street. You go 25 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, and it records all of this and records traffic. It's a great tool and it was an expensive tool. I think when Mike comes back and says, well, Tanya, or whomever she's speaking with, this is what the data says. And they should be able to make that decision at that point and not have to come back to the board for $1,400 and have 2 or 3 more meetings discussing this reaction.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. All right, moving on to the next question. This is for Supervisor Brooks. one of your pet projects was the new shuffleboard courts. Will we be getting the money to offset the cost from the county as promised, or will the county find some reason to renege as usual?
This is my first dealing with the
I don't
county.
mean to interrupt, but we cannot see your participants from this. Thank you.
Can you put it back here so I can hide it? This is my first dealing with the county as far as trying to secure funds. I think we did it through, it was RPAC money. To my knowledge, we're gonna get 50% of the cost of the project. They were agreed to it. And I have not heard anything that says it's not gonna happen. If we've had a bad experience in the past with the county, I am not aware of it. So I can't really comment on it. I can tell you that this project was 50% funded.
Has that ever happened where they didn't pay up on it? Has the county ever reneged on it correctly?
No, sir.
I don't think so.
Just curious where that question would come from.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Moving on to the next question. This will be for each of you. I will start with Mr. Camp. What is the single most important problem facing Sun and Lake that must be resolved for Sun and Lake to survive as we know it? Please keep the comments at a minimal because we are recording live. Thank you.
That's interesting. It's a catch-22, I think. We need to grow, but because the only place we get revenue is from assessments and from water primarily. So if we don't grow, and our budget currently is roughly around $12 million annually, we'll be able to survive. If we have a catastrophic failure where, and I say catastrophic failure, where we lose our, let's say, piping, 300,000, although it was only $300,000, but we thought it was a $50,000 project or a $75,000 project. If we have many of those, I think that could affect us because I'm not sure that we right now have the ability to float loans. I know that we finally finished some things. I think it's the Fifth Third. Is that correct? Fifth Third? Yes? No?
We have names through Fifth Third.
And
Where they, we financed that as, it was a bond issue for infrastructure.
but it's coming off the books, correct?
Actually, it was a loan, I'm sorry.
Is it coming off the books?
That the last meeting, it was phase 5 that we talked about, which that was the actual bond issue for the infrastructure that we built in the areas of Deer Run and some of the other areas inside Sun.
So I guess when they do our audit, is that going to be, is that lien still going to be on our books?
The Fifth Third lien will no longer be on the books as a liability, it'll just be mentioned in the notes to the financial statement.
So that's really advantage because now we would be able to secure a loan if something catastrophic happened. And I know it didn't answer directly your question about the catastrophic failure, but I think that we could be in tough shape.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. Mr. Branson, what is the single most important problem facing Sun and Lake that must be resolved for Sun and Lake to survive as we know it?
My response to that goes back to capital. We have a massive investment in capital equipment out in the new maintenance building. There's a huge amount of that equipment that is unutilized and underutilized. So I intend to become very involved in any equipment replacement requested in the budget to determine whether owning versus renting makes sense, to determine whether spending capital and not getting a return on it makes sense. And I also want to look going forward at sharing of resources. I understand that I don't have specifics, that we have equipment in the maintenance building that belongs to the district. And the golf course goes out and rents that same equipment because they're not allowed to use it. I don't know if that's fact or fiction, but I've been told that. Those are the kinds of things that I intend to get involved in. And to make sure that if we put capital into equipment, it's It's equipment we can justify owning.
Thank you, Mr. Branson. Mr. Brooks, did you want me to repeat the question?
No. My answer is very simple. We need to grow Sun Lake. We need to get more residents. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I have two more questions. This one is for Supervisor Branson. The latest clubhouse restaurant renovation costing close to $2 million, all things considered, has not been very popular with the residents. You spearheaded this renovation process. Do you feel good about your judgment, or do you feel it was a mistake, as many do?
Let me qualify that on the front end. I had concerns for the kitchen, the safety and the sanitation in the kitchen, both of which were on the edge of, we could be shut down by the state at any point in time. We knew we were doing things illegally. So my initial intent was to expand the kitchen, provide the ability to do sanitation properly, and to provide a safe work environment. Granted, we've been lucky, we've not had injuries, but I can tell you that in a lot of states of the union, OSHA would have shut that down because of the way we work. In terms of the money, it went from a kitchen expansion to expansion of the dining area and to the lanai. I keep hearing new numbers. That's the first $2 million number I've heard. The thing's really popped up a few times. My initial proposal was to spend $600,000 to $650,000 in renovating the kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Branson. That was just a question for Mr. Branson. Okay, this is the very last question. It'll be for each of you. Mr. Brooks. Are the HOA rules, homeowners association rules, applicable to all areas of Sun and Lake? Seems like there are some houses that are not visible in Sun and Lake that can do whatever they want.
This is me.
This is for each of you. Are the HOA rules applicable to all areas of Sun and Lake?
Somebody has to help me. It's my understanding that if you live in like Manor Hill or another area within Sun Lakes that has its own association, those rules will override the district's rules. That's how I think I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes. Kind of, yes.
I'm sorry?
If those rules are more restrictive than the districts, then yes, they override the districts.
So,
They cannot be less restrictive than the district.
is it possible that there is something going on within a specific area within Sun Lakes that does not match up with our HOA rules? It's very possible. To really tell you if it's correct or not, I think we'd have to get a little bit more into specifics and see exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Camp?
Please repeat the question.
Are the HOA rules applicable to all areas of Sun and Lake? Seems like there are some houses that are not visible in Sun and Lake that can do whatever they want.
Well, it's my understanding that there's only a few HOAs. I think it's the Preserve, I think it's Manor Hill, I think it's a Deer Run. I think those are the only three associations or HOAs, which are homeowners associations, that, as Mr. Schumacher said, their regulations will trump the district's regulations if they are stricter. So I didn't think HOAs at all had anything to do with property in Sun and Lake that is not part of an HOA. Read the question back again, I apologize.
Are the HOA rules applicable to all areas of Sun and Lake?
The answer would be, a simple answer would be no. That's the simple answer. HOAs are controlling only their association. Manor Hill, Preserve, and Magnolia, thank you.
You're right.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. Mr. Branson?
I think that the HOAs are largely a function of deed restriction. And the deed restricted communities have them. They all work pretty hard to try to enforce them. I've had two properties in Sun Lakes. I have no HOA or deed restrictions where I live now, and none in the last property. So if my neighbor wants to put up a shed or a Quonset hut or whatever, there's little or nothing I can do about it. That's just a fact of life. You should know that before you buy property.
Thank you, Mr. Branson. That is all the questions that have been submitted to me in writing. So now I would like to open the floor up to the public to ask questions.
Move the podium over to the side.
Well, no, you're right. Well, you can put it right here, and we'll share. So if anybody has any questions they would like to come forward and ask, now's the time to do that. Everybody has their questions to answer? There you go.
Come on, Sheriff.
Lee Benson, property owner. Years past, I think I'm the oldest here in 1980.
Into the mic.
Speak into the microphone.
1987, anybody from that?
Does the variance count?
Well, I've been coming to these meetings for about 30 years, and nothing's changed. That's a good thing. But all of my supervisor friends are dead, Miller, and, you know, you fellows do a great job, and I appreciate it. But we talk about the past, the present, and the future. Future's number one, Mark. Future's number one. We've got to get more people in here. Number two, we've got to maintain what we have. That's number two. And the past is past. So all I've got to say is congratulations on doing a great job. I'm rounding third base, heading for home. And why are you laughing?
Don't slide.
But nobody else has got the guts to stand up here and talk. I'm not in there, but whatever. I sound like So anyway, congratulations, and somebody would say something. Past, present, future.
Thank you, Wayne.
Name is Wally Murder from Annual Circle. We got one question for all three of you. Do you know who checks or inspects Earl's work?
Who inspects Earl's work?
Yeah, Mike who?
There.
He checks his work and approves it.
His boss name is, help me.
Brian. The regional, who Mike reports to is Brian, I don't remember Brian.
Rhodes. Rhodes.
Rhodes? Brian Rhodes.
Brian Rose, so how often would he come to hole number 14 and check the work that he's doing? That he approved?
I couldn't answer that.
Thank you.
You got that 14 on Turtle?
Absolutely.
Dennis Swanson, resident. I wonder why Sun and Lake hasn't made homeowners association that covers the whole area. Because as you want to grow, you're going to have some areas that aren't going to be so good. And if you have the whole complex under the same rules, people come in, they buy a house, they'll know this is what it should be. They're not going to end up with a neighbor who comes in and decides, I want to put a wall around my house, have $5 bargain back there.
And I said, I think what we've run into in the past, Dennis, is some of these HOAs were started after World War II. Those people had the opportunity to be exempt and not be subject to the deed restriction. You can't go put a set of rules in for people who are already there. It's called grandfather.
Okay, going in effective from this day on, and those grandfather people in, grandfathered in, because most of them are taking good care of the property.
I suppose we could entertain anything, I mean, it would be a difficult thing to do, I'm not saying it's wrong,
Well, I just see some of these fences going up along a golf course.
and I agree, I understand, I
And
love
I
to see
see
that,
that.
I agree.
Suzanne Wyatt. I heard you say, Ray, that we put some money ahead, put money behind, saving some money effective for January. If our Canadian friends and Northerners don't come back, are we gonna be able, is the golf course gonna be able to survive if we don't have our northern folks
Yes.
come to see us?
I can tell you, we did I had Mike come up with some numbers for us, the Canadians, nobody shows. And they go up in the border, for example. It's, it would be a loss of income based on last year's memberships of $250,000. That would also translate to a loss here at the restaurant,
Sure.
obviously, in the total secret.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we're hoping 500,000, so I don't believe there's going to be an issue of having to do anything, closing the course or anything of that nature.
Will it be raising any of the fees for us residents who are here full time to compensate for the loss of income without?
Oh, I'd rather not.
Is that what we're,
That doesn't seem
is
to
that
be a
being
very
entertained at
popular
all?
vote. I'm sorry?
Is that being entertained at all? Did you see that out in the community that prices have increased greatly because we don't have the traffic that we used to have? And I was just wondering, is that going to translate over to
Well,
the
we
restaurant
did
and golf
take,
course?
so then we did take a price increase on the golf memberships this year.
Sure.
I believe it was about 3%.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. So there was a price increase, but to look at doing anything further, I think it's premature. I mean, if we really ran into a serious problem, we didn't have any money, we would probably entertain it, but I don't think it's gonna come to that.
Okay.
Just to like a little bit, our outside play is up because we have less people here. So based on the season, the time of year, we're doing fairly well.
Right.
I've talked to people out there from Tampa who come here to play these courses because they feel like they're as good as they can find for the price. So the fact that we lose our Canadian friends, God forbid, doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna lose all of the revenue. Because hopefully we'll replace it with outside play. And for the most part, that generates $2 per round.
There's not many.
So there is hope.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Melody Delegard. I'm a homeowner. I've had a couple of drinks, but, I do want to thank the board for this last year. We have had so many things that have happened in our little community with that has benefited us. We had a hog problem. They stepped up, they put a fence that prevented the hogs from getting back into our area. You have no idea how that helped us with our properties. Because you can't sell anything or do anything if everything's dug up and looks like. So I want to start off with that. I appreciate all of you with your comments and look forward to a successful year. It has helped having this meeting. I think that we have been able to make some decisions based on these comments. So we appreciate everything that you have done for us. Thank you.
I'm always doing a great job with that fence, and I think he always better at 30,000 like.
Yeah.
And, there's probably 40 properties that benefit from that, so.
No, they're not.
That was a great investment on our part. Well done. Where are you?
Bill Northwest resident, glad to see all these people here. I really wish they would show up on a district meeting. It would be really helpful. A lot of people do. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the work that these guys do, the candidates and the people who are elected. The only thing that I can say that I have spent hours and hours in there taking pictures of everybody for historical reasons. But the micromanaging, we brought that up, not a new word. We brought that up, and I tell you what, we discussed one time about shall the rake be in the trap or out of the trap? Now, that was a big deal. I said, it's not a big deal when you're spending 45 minutes on damn valuable time. So I appreciate if you guys would kind of cut down the micromanaging, leave it, whether it's 2 golf carts or 1 golf cart, leave it up to management on the lower level and go ahead and do the most important things like taking care of speeding and other problems that we have out here. I appreciate you guys being up here. Thank you.
Here, thank you.
Any more questions from the public? Okay, well, I'd like to move on to the candidate closing statements. I'll start with Mr. Brooks since I start with Mr. Branson on the opening statement. So Mr. Brooks?
Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming. It really is, it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to have this kind of conversation versus some of the conversations we have at our board meetings. So this truly it's truly appreciated, I'm sure, by all 3 of us. Well, actually, all of us, including the other guys that are sitting in the audience who are also supervisors. If you do reelect me, I'm going to tell you 2 things that I'm going to try and do for you. I'm going to try and continue to always have a balanced budget. Easier said than done. You have a tendency to spend money, but I am going to continue to try and do that. I am going to try and push for the infrastructure, continue to push that, continue to allocate that to the tune of at least $500,000 a year, unless I'm told by our leaders that we have more of a serious problem than I think we have. I think 500,000 over the course of 15 or 20 years should be enough to do it. I'm going to try to stress to the board the importance of a 5-year capital plan. We haven't spent that much time on that tonight. But a 5-year capital plan truly gives you an indication of the monies that you're going to need to accomplish what you want to accomplish over a 5-year period. I mean, it's cut and dry. If the plan is not that good, you have no clue what you're doing. So I think it's critically important. I'm a big supporter of a 5-year plan. In fact, Mr. Hotelli will tell you that maybe it should be a 10-year plan, which I agree with, but I think first you have to get to 5 years and then you can talk about getting to 10 years. I am going to continue to help and develop a plan to improve the recreational amenities that we have. I think that's critically important. Not saying that all the things that I mentioned before have to be addressed, but I think it's important that we do continue to improve what we offer other than the golf. The biggest challenge I think we have is the relationship and the communication between the Board of Supervisors, the district, and the residents of Center Lake. That really bothers me. It's great to see you guys here, but when we have a board meeting, we have 7 or 8 people, we have a lot of people. And then people don't understand what's going on. They find out at the last minute and they come to us and they say, how could you possibly do this? What were you thinking? And we may have been discussing it for 3 or 4 months. So our communication with you guys is horrible. And I blame the district and the board on this. I can't blame you guys, you just can only do with what you receive. And I'm going to try and stress to our district that we improve the communication. Lastly, and I'll close with this, I represent all of you guys. And any decisions that I make, any votes that I take, any conversations that I have, I try to do so with you guys in mind, since I do represent you. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Gannon?
I really believe Ray must have been figuring out the budget. He covered about 90% of what I was gonna say, so, and that's an unfortunate thing. So, I talked about the beautification plans and things of that nature. I totally agree. I believe in 5-year budgets, or plans, I should say. And I also heard over the previous, my experience on the board, that people said, "Nah, we only go 1 to 2 years. We don't have to worry about 3 to 5." Well, that wasn't the way I used to apply when I was in business. It was always a 5-year plan or greater. It is a guideline, okay? So I have to agree with them on that. Like I was saying, I think the beautification plan, so I'm looking at individual programs now, since he took everything from me. Name recognition for Sun Lake. But, you know, the golf operation, we need to work with the golf operation, and I'm not quite sure how this will all take place. I have some ideas. And we're also in the process of, there's an RFP out, if you people aren't familiar with what we're doing, or what they're doing. There's an RFP out to look for potentially, and I say potentially, another management company to try to get an idea or a feel for what they might do differently than the existing operation that's here, the Billy Casper operation, or I guess it's Buffalo Communications now. But I also caution everybody to say, what you think is, the grass is always greener on the other side. We have a specific area that I believe is a little bit of an issue with the Casper organization. So it's not on the course, although some people might disagree with me, it's here. And so my approach would be to get something going here. Once again, everybody on the existing board has mentioned it. More importantly, I am looking at fiscal conservative values here. When somebody comes up, and I mentioned it earlier, and I know this isn't the form of closing statement, but I have to get it out. When we were in talks, or when they were in talks with the hustle up the street, I don't have anything about donations. No problem. Some ideas were tossed around, a $200,000 sponsorship donation. Actually, one board member recommended $1 million. We're a $12 million budgeted community. So why these ideas start to get rolling, I don't know. But it's all part of the board. And I've been on the boards before, and I know how some of that happens, but not all of it happens. So we got to reel in some of the spending. Now, and one of the things that Joe said, and I was on the board at the time with Joe, one of the things that Joe said, and all valid, you know, the kitchen safety and all of these things, what started out to be, after we had all of the consultants come in, was going to be around $1.1 million. Then the board got together and we said, no, we're going to cap it. I said this in my earliest statements, we're going to cap it to $650. And guess what? They had $950 in the budget. I said, no, we can't do that. They said, we're going to pass the budget with $950. I said, no, you can't pass the budget with $950. If you have it in there, you'll spend it. And ultimately ends up, I think it was $1.3 million. Somebody said $2 million. I don't know where that number came from.
Go ahead.
I'm getting the, okay. So let me just say to you that I worked a lot of hours when I was on the board in the past. I spent 25 to 30 hours a week researching things, meeting with people, going out to sites. I'm not saying these guys don't do it, and the other board members out there don't do it. But I did put a tremendous amount of time. I also took a tremendous amount of calls from the people in the community. The communication between the community and myself was stellar. And I pride myself in that. People would say to me, well, I don't get any calls. And I said, the reason you don't get calls is you're probably not responding to their requests. And the more you respond to somebody's request, the more you're going to get calls. It's kind of like Michael in the back. Michael does everything. Everything. At a board meeting, somebody said, well, who do you call if you're having a problem?
Mike,
Exactly. Actually, you said it, I believe, didn't you? You didn't say that to me. Somebody said, call Mike.
No, I said.
You know, he does an incredible job. I sat with him 2 months ago before I ended up
Thank you.
this.
Yeah.
Look, can I finish
Please go
that?
ahead, yes, sir.
I sat with Michael 2 months ago before I put my name even in for this. I sat with him in Broomfield. And I said, what can we do better in this community to make your job easier, to make Broomfield's job easier, and at the same time, being able to keep up with the code violations. So those are the types of things I'm gonna do. I'm not looking at pie in the sky 10 years out, okay? I'm looking immediately to get things rolling here. And I would appreciate the people if they would vote for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. Mr. Branson?
The key to a job like this, in my mind, is that you leave it as good or better than you found it. Kitchen project wasn't popular. It hasn't panned out, and part of that's virus related, but we solved the problem that I initially was trying to solve. We spent more money than I intended to see spent. On the other side, I've had family here for the last 12 weeks. I bring them here for dinner, and they think it's the most wonderful place in the world. I made it my business if someone contacted me with a question, to get them a response. I've been to people's backyards where they felt mowing wasn't adequate. I've met with people. I try to follow up and get answers. I am budget conscious. I spent 30 years of my life contracting and negotiating, and I intend to do a lot more of that. So if I'm successful in getting reelected, you'll probably be hearing a lot more from me in board meetings than you have in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I would like to mention that the minutes for this meeting will be available on the district's website here after completed. So I appreciate each and every one of you for attending.
We certainly appreciate your attendance tonight, and as the candidates have said, we would love to have this kind of turnout for our board meeting. And if the timing of the board meeting, which has traditionally been on Friday morning, that's not the best time to meet. If you'd rather have evening meetings or occasionally, let us know. We can make adjustments. We would love to have this kind of participation in the work that we do for you. So, thank you, and with that, we will adjourn the meeting.